This one is for the DMs out there. Has this ever happened to you? You run a session, or maybe you're a veteran DM and you're trying a new homebrew or a new style of game. Or maybe the opposite, you haven't tried something new in a little while and you think things are getting kind of stale. In any case, the session ends and you ask everyone at the table, how was the game? And predictably, they give you some vague, kind of feel-good answers. It was good! I had fun! Thanks a lot! And, well, these are really nice sentiments. As a DM, this type of feedback is not very helpful. If you think things didn't go very smoothly, but all you get are positive compliments, you may begin to distrust your own intuition. Even more dangerously, if your players are only saying positive things because they're uncomfortable critiquing your game, you may begin to believe their own hype. Or they may have genuinely enjoyed it, but because you have a lack of experience, or for some other reason, you may just be a little bit paranoid and feel like they're not telling you the truth even when they are. In most cases, from feedback like this alone, you're not going to have enough information to operate off of in order to tune your game so that it can be the best it can be. And that is where having a strong feedback system brings your game from being good and fun to excellent and compelling. Hi, I'm John from Incendium D&D, and today we're talking about implementing feedback systems to elevate your game. Let's get into it. First things first, if you saw Ian's Level Up Skyrim video, then you may have seen that we're doing a fun new thing for getting subscribers on this channel. Rather than the usual, hey, you should subscribe, we're gonna do a little bit of a roll-off, so get your D20 ready. I'm gonna roll a persuasion check, you're gonna roll an insight check, and if my roll beats yours, then you're a new subscriber. Ooh, a 17. So any of you that rolled below a 17, welcome to the channel. Now, of course, feedback in TTRPGs is not a new topic. Feedback is just a part of the human condition. From when we're young in school and we get grades on a report card. F's for everybody! To our parents praising or punishing us.
Looks like you're going to the Shadow Realm, Jimbo.
All of these cumulative experiences shape an individual's relationship to feedback. I've met some people that just can't take a compliment, and others where the tiniest little critique starts sending them on this mental spiral, leading them to egregiously overcorrect whatever behavior or choice they made. Context also matters. It's one thing to receive critical feedback in an academic environment, or being told by your dental assistant to floss. It's another to be critiqued on something so personal and emotional as a TTRPG that you love to run. And I've found it can be equally, if not more uncomfortable, for players to give critical feedback to their DMs. I mean, think about it. Your DM has been talking up this game for maybe weeks or months that they're so excited to run. If it's not 100% perfect, it can feel like you're shooting down their enthusiasm by giving any kind of criticism, even if it's constructive or even if they did a lot of things right, because 9 times out of 10, it's something that the DM or game master of another system truly cares about. So, when a DM asks a vague question like, how did I do? Or how did the game go? Most likely, they're going to receive a vague positive answer in return, regardless of how the players actually feel. That is, unless I'm one of your players. Then, I'll tell you pretty bluntly how I feel about the game. Which, as an aside, I feel in my interactions with different DMs actually is more helpful, because although hearing criticisms from me can sting, if I really like your game, you don't have to wonder if I meant what I said. One strategy that I've seen gain a lot of traction in recent years, and one that I used personally as both a player and a DM for about a year and a half, is stars and wishes. Stars are things that happened in a session that players particularly liked, whereas a wish, to quote the TTRPG blog The Gauntlet, is an optimistic request for change that, according to this website, to paraphrase, is more likely to yield productive, healthy outcomes. In its theoretical, most basic form, at the end of a session, each player awards a star to the DM or another player for a moment that particularly stood out to them positively. And a wish is just something that they're looking forward to in the next game. So it could be, I wish this game had a little bit more time with social interaction, or I wish my character would get to know this other character a little better. For today's discussion, we are specifically framing this in terms of Dungeon Master feedback, but these feedback systems can be adjusted to work player to player or DM to player as well. You'll notice that this language is intentionally gentle so as to ease certain personalities that may have a tumultuous relationship with feedback. But at the end of the day, what you're really asking, rather than a vague, how did you like the game, is what's something you liked and what's something that you wish for. Again, after using this system myself, as a DM asking players for feedback, and as a player giving feedback to my DM, I can confidently say this is not the system for me. Here's why. In general, the players that answered my stars and wishes request didn't give me any better feedback than a normal vague question, if they gave me any feedback at all. In fact, one player, who is a teacher by trade, told me that the name Stars and Wishes sounded really needy to her. Like, as a DM, I was like, oh, teacher, please, can you give me a star and tell me I did good? And in her words, it felt a little too kindergarten. I can already imagine certain individuals where this gentler language is perfect. Most of my players who are adults did not respond well to stars and wishes. Another thing that came up was just that, again, even though this is now a more specific frame of what's something positive and something constructively critical you can tell me, even if we discard the stars and wishes label, is that, again, those questions are still too vague. My players are busy adults that have jobs and have lives. So rather than basically ask them for a long form answer of stars and wishes, or answers that are too short, one of the conversations I had with Stephanie from Borrowing Brilliance, linked in the description below, was to ask very specific questions that will give information that will allow you as the DM to take action to adjust your game if it's necessary. The other thing with stars and wishes is I found a lot of times I would ask my players, what's a wish for the game? And they'd tell me I'm enjoying it just enough, I wish for it to just stay the same. Which is fine feedback, although it's not really digging into the specific things they like about the game. Because again, the star is just too vague a question to ask. So I tried something new, and it's worked out pretty well for me. I want to share it with you today. Maybe it'll help you too. So let's hop over and take a look. So as you can see, I created a Google form in order to collect feedback from my players. I chose this methodology because it's free, it's easy to use, it's very accessible to my players. I can just send them the link in a Facebook message. They can just open it up, maybe even at work, and just kind of click through some of the options. And there's both points that are kind of like multiple choice, and other points where they have room to make longer form comments. The other thing I like about this is that feedback is easily documented, and it's easy to see trends and patterns that a verbal conversation or just a long form text message is going to be harder to see overall. The other thing is the form feels a little more anonymous, so it's not like I can see which player put what answer to what. You know, by reading a lot of their answers, you can figure out by the way that they type or specific little things where they're like, my character, in one of the answers. Obviously you can start attaching like answers to faces, but because the visual is a little bit more objective, I feel like it's easier for my players to be comfortable giving critical feedback when normally they wouldn't. So the key thing that you'll see here is that a lot of the questions that I'm asking are on a Goldilocks style sliding scale. So rather than having, oh, I did good at this, oh, you need to work on this, really we're looking at the balance of the game. Did the players feel like there was enough time for something, or did they feel like there was too little, or we dwelled on something for too long? It also doesn't mean there should be like this perfect even split between all of the game elements. It just means in the context of this session, how many adjustments should be made in order to emphasize the parts of the game that my players really love. And I think that there are a lot of DMs that would be like, oh, I read the room. Oh, I know my players and I know my audience. And using this tool will either validate that, or it'll start to reveal some gaps in your understanding or your intuition. So while you're at the table, you can start to trust your intuition or hone it a little more finely. Now, of course, my game of choice is 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. One of the nice things about talking about D&D is that there are very clear 3 pillars of play: social interaction, exploration, and combat. And I'm sure that in your game system of choice, there are probably going to be similar categories of scenes. Although again, I haven't played every TTRPG under the sun. So you'll be able to adjust these questions a little more based on your particular system. But as you see, the first question I ask, because usually it's how a game I run opens, is with social interaction. So how much time do you feel was spent on social interaction? And I like to define kind of like what I'm looking for. So rather than assuming they know what social interactions should look like, parts of the game where player characters converse amongst themselves or with NPCs, usually in a way that deepens their emotional development. So I know there'll probably be some debate on what social interaction is and how it's different than exploration. But again, it's my game, they're my definitions. So how I define exploration is parts of the game where player characters discover something new by investigating environments, travel, or through questioning NPCs. The questioning NPCs overlaps with social interaction, but I look at social interaction more as times for players, again, to deepen their emotional development if they choose to, whereas exploration is more questioning things and learning something about the mission at hand rather than their internal development. And for each of these pillars, you got the Goldilocks sliding scale. So 5 in this case would be like perfectly balanced.
This whole thing should be.
In that, like, let's say in one session, there was very short social interaction, but there was a lot of exploration. If that's what the players felt was appropriate and they didn't have any like further emotional development they wanted, they might give me a 5 on social interaction even if I didn't spend a lot of time on it. Whereas a game where it feels like the social interaction is dragging on, they might give me more of an 8 or a 9. Or again, if I skipped by it and they wanted to sit there and just talk about, clams and how that reflects their soul as a person or something, I don't know, then they might give me like more of a 2 or a 3. And the other key thing here is that you'll see with the little red asterisks, the sliding scale is a required thing to answer. The long answer text is not. So players, if they want to dive into specifics or they want to voice like a concern or a wish or whatever, or even something they really like, they have the chance to tell me. But if they don't have anything that comes to mind, they can skip right over it. Lastly, combat is the parts of the game where player characters fight in a structured turn order. Probably the simplest and the easiest to understand. Now, the other thing about the feedback system is it's a hidden two-way street. Not only am I, as the dungeon master, trying to collect valuable feedback to best tune my game so it's at its best state, I also want to bring my players to the attention of the parts of the game that I want them to get the most out of. So for example, I've read a lot of posts and heard a lot of DMs talk about how the player characters don't feel like 3-dimensional fleshed out characters. They're more just avatars for the players' personalities to interact with the game environment, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But again, some players don't know that there's a way to play D&D where you create a separate personality that you embody. Or they think that they're doing it, or when they do it, it's all about their character and they're not really thinking about the dynamics between different characters. So for example, I have a question here, and I'm still workshopping it, that says the next series of questions relates to the narrative development of each player character. How much development do you think each character got? Examples of some ways characters develop include team synergy, contributing to overall plot progression, individual emotional development, and how much real-world time was spent with them in the spotlight. Again, there might be a session where one character spends a lot of individual time in the spotlight, but for that particular session, the other players were really engaged, they got a lot out of the session. So even though they spent more time, it was still balanced in what the players wanted. And another thing is that this starts to train players to pay attention to the development of other player characters at the table. So for example, how much character development did character 1 receive? And what I normally do is I just, copy paste out character 1 with one of the characters in the session. And same thing as the 3 pillars of play: Goldilocks sliding scale, long form answers. And frankly, there were some times in my latest game where, as the DM, I've been playing with these players for like 36-hour sessions each. And I was still surprised by some of their answers of like, oh, this character was really cool, or I really like that moment, or I really wonder about this character's backstory based on something they said. So again, even if you think you know your audience, feedback like this can be useful to help dispel some unhelpful assumptions that can actually hold you back from running your best game. So another thing that I think is really, really key, NPC involvement. So same Goldilocks sliding scale. How many NPCs were in this session? Were there too few, too many, just right? How do you feel about the amount of time as the DM I had you spend with the NPCs? And last, mechanically, did the NPCs contribute? Do you wish they actually did more? I actually kind of got that sense out of the latest game I ran. Or did they hog the spotlight too much? And then last, I have some very simple long-form questions. What was your favorite part of the session? This is kind of like a star. What moment did you find particularly memorable? Notice that's different. It's not a vague, what did you like? There is a favorite part of the session, but when you ask it in a different way, which moment did you find particularly memorable? It may not have been their favorite part. It might have been, oh man, when that guy took me out in one hit and my character dropped. I'm gonna remember that. Another good one is, what were you looking forward to that didn't happen? This is one of those that DMs don't usually think about and don't know to ask. But if you think about it, there might be things that your players were really looking forward to. And because you didn't know it as the DM, you didn't know to integrate it in the game. And it's not until players are given this kind of objective permission to share their feedback that they'll speak up. And again, it might not happen every time. They might just say, everything happened that I wanted to. And then that's the information you go with. But again, to come back to the latest session that I ran this past Sunday, I had a player say, I thought the mission was gonna look like something going in. I didn't realize we were gonna end up in as serious a combat as we did. And it did work out for the better, but the intel gathering part I thought we were gonna do for the session didn't happen. So again, these questions aren't framed as good, bad, positive, negative. It's information to help you balance out your game so you can tune it so it's the best game it can be. And then last but not least, what are you looking forward to in the next session? And for me, this is what reminds them about why they're playing and helps build the anticipation so that they start engaged right out of the gate. Again, a lot of this is information for me as the DM, but it's also a way to train my players into certain rhythms of the game so they can fill their part as smoothly as possible. So now I want to hear your thoughts. Does this kind of feedback system sound helpful to you? If you were a player and your DM sent this kind of link, how likely is it that you'd actually fill it out thoughtfully? Let me know in the comments down below, and have an awesome day, everybody. Bye-bye now.